And why we have revolution, it's similar reason to Taiwan. Like, we are not happy with the parliament or the president, and people go out on the street and they fight it. So unfortunately, if the law is not on your side, or if your own government is not on your side, people have to take matter in their own hands. Because it's a good thing that Taiwanese people pay attention to what's going on in their country. That's from Ukrainian perspective. I can only say like 加油。我叫 Nadiia， 我是从乌克兰来的，在台湾读研究所，已经2年半了。是因为2022开始有打仗，我那时候在乌克兰还是学生，也在大学读书。那后来我父母说，因为打仗就在乌克兰不安全，所以可不可以出去国外找一些机会。然后我在网络上看到有一所台湾大学请乌克兰学生来，所以我觉得哇，台湾没想到在台湾有机会免费的读书，得到奖学金。Ukraine's and Russia's relationship has always been very complicated. When the war first started in 2014, I was 14-year-old. I was like middle school. I did not understand why Russia would invade Ukraine, because before that everything seemed fine. I never understood like why would Russia invade and for what reason. When the war started, I was in Bulgaria and I never imagined that I won't be able to come back home. So I remember the war started in the morning, first news about the bombings, that they started bombing. And I remember the first death reported. It was a woman. They said like a woman died from a bombing. And I was so shocked because I could not believe my eyes. Then in 21st centuries, people are dying in my countries from bombs. So the borders were flooded with people. And I was in touch with my family. They were all okay, but very scared. And my parents told me, don't come back right now because, in Russian TV, President Putin, he said it will only take 3 days to capture the whole Ukraine. And like 3 days later, they will have a victory parade in Kyiv. Russia does not see Ukraine as an equal independent state. After the breakup of Soviet Union, I don't think Russian government and Russian people ever accepted the fact that Ukraine was a different country and was independent. So while in Ukraine, we never understood the threat of that. We were just like, living our lives. But in Russia, since 1991, they were talking openly about taking back what belonged to them, what's theirs. So this kind of reminds me of Taiwan, because Taiwan is also like, you're separate from China. You have always been separate from China, but people in China, they cannot give up, right? Like they just will keep talking and trying to claim Taiwan's back. A very big shock for many people. My father, he's very politically active. He's been engaged in local politics. So he always taught us to be more conscious, like read a lot of books, understand situation better. So because of good education, I was able to, when I was just 14, I was able to understand like, oh, so Russia is the enemy. So we have to cut off all the contacts from the enemy because it's very dangerous. I stopped reading like Russian books and watching Russian TV and listening to Russian music since 2014. But unfortunately, many people in Ukraine still did that because Russian propaganda, they want to make you believe that culture and politics are different things. But actually, culture is politics' instrument. And Russia uses culture to spread influence in the world. They want to reclaim back Ukraine's independence, Ukrainian people try really hard to, cut off this influence and just, focus on our own culture, language, or just avoid anything Russian. I'm not sure about how many people died from Ukrainian side, but there are a lot of civilian casualties compared to casualties in Russia. Because Russia, they target civilians a lot. So we call this war basically a genocide. Because when Russia invaded, they target schools, hospitals, kindergartens. They use tactic when they first, bomb some building. Then they wait until rescue team comes, and then they bomb again to kill more people. Why they want this? Because Russia is similar to China, an authoritarian regime. And authoritarian regimes, they don't value human lives. For them, it doesn't matter how many people dies, because they will always find more people. They will send some people from east of Russia to live in these territories that they liberate. They've been bombing us a lot, and also China supplies. There were some news that China has been supplying Russia with particles for the drones. So, we have not been able to accuse China like directly, but so far situation like this, there are drones which have Chinese components in them, and Russia produces a lot of them. Yeah, so recently they've been using a lot more drones. Like these few days, it could be more than 500 drones overnight, which they target at civilian areas.
乌克兰跟俄罗斯的关系，跟台湾跟中国的关系，你觉得是很相似的吗？
Yeah, of course they are similar, but there are also some difference, because Ukraine and Russia are two different countries, and we have different languages and different histories. We have been fighting with Russia, to be honest, for a very long time. I read some statistic recently. I've seen like this current war that we have since 2022 is actually 141st war that we have with Russia throughout like history for thousands of years. The biggest problem that we have is that Russia is basically a modern colonial empire. And any colonial empires, they want to extend their territories because they always feast on the colonists. So if you ask Russians, they will tell you like, oh, Ukraine is not a country. Ukrainian language does not exist. It's just a Russian dialect. And they will say like all Ukrainians are basically Russians, but, secondhand, like second sort Russians. Not good enough to be like them, but also like not good enough to be our own nation, our own country. In Taiwan, situation is, I think, very similar. I would say like you are, in my opinion, in Taiwan is more complicated actually. It's more complicated because Taiwanese population is a mix of different ethnicities. For example, Yanzhumin, and different waves of immigrants from China. And Ukraine, we don't have Yanzhumin because we're all Yanzhumin. All of us are basically aboriginals. Like we've been living on the same territory for many years. But China is also similar to Russia. It's also in a way a colonial empire, and it's a dictatorship. So dictatorships, I think Taiwanese people and Ukrainian people are similar in terms of mentality. Like, Taiwanese people are really good, really welcoming, really kind. And similar to Ukraine, like, we never wanted this war. If you ask any Ukrainian, we just wanted to keep living on our land and mind our own business. Yeah, and Taiwanese are the same. You would never invade any other country. You just want to keep living in your own land and mind your own business. But some, bully country around us keep trying to hurt us and, for God knows whatever reasons. When I just arrived to Taiwan, because, like people in other countries, they usually perceive Taiwan from media, and media always mention Taiwan only in case of, immediate threat of invasion from China. So when I first arrived to Taiwan 2 years ago, I remember at that time, I think Nancy Pelosi was visiting Taiwan. And everywhere in the news, they were saying like, oh no, Nancy Pelosi will come and China will immediately invade. And everyone got really, really scared. So my dad, who's a soldier at the front line in Ukraine, he saw the news and he called me and he asked me, please come back home to safety. And I'm like, Dad, really? You want me to come back from Taiwan to Ukraine for safety? Are you joking? I noticed that local people seem to be used to this, so they are very calm and composed. Yeah, so I also became, calmer.
TikTok 应该在台湾落地到俄罗斯都应该都会有使用到，我们会觉得说 TikTok 它也带了危险性。
I personally don't use TikTok for the same reason, because Russia also uses TikTok for spreading Russian propaganda. But I don't think the problem is in TikTok itself. I think it's like the whole system of Chinese propaganda. Maybe it's not like you just stop watching TikTok and you will be free from all Chinese influence. I think every person has to realize, I realized it myself a long time ago, like any kind of information that you consume, any book you read, any journal you read, will somehow influence your perspective, like how you see the world. So you just have to be really, really careful about what you're consuming. It's like food, right? You don't want to eat junk food all the time. You want to eat healthy to stay healthy. So it's not only about TikTok. Of course, like if you want to avoid getting influenced by China, you should avoid TikTok and like Chinese TV. I've met Taiwanese people who are like regular people, but they just prefer watching Chinese TV or Chinese news. And when we talk about Ukraine, they also have very, very wrong impression, because Russian propaganda also works through Chinese propaganda. I've met people who told me that they've asked me, like, how could you elect such a horrible, ugly, unprofessional president? They were talking about my president, Zelensky. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? Where did you, get it from? And turns out those people were watching Chinese news. And I don't speak Chinese well enough to, understand the nuanced local politics. But I think that's a good thing, yeah. Because it's a good thing that Taiwanese people pay attention to what's going on in their country. That's, from Ukrainian perspective, I can only say, like, 加油. Because Ukraine is famous for having a lot of revolutions. We had 4, I think, so far, since the start of, since Ukraine got independence in 1991. And why we have a revolution, it's similar reason to Taiwan, like we are not happy with the parliament or the president, and people go out on the street and they fight it. So unfortunately, if the law is not on your side, or if your own government is not on your side, people have to take matter in their own hands. So I wish Taiwanese people luck, and I think, good job for paying attention to what's going on in your country. I just want to say thank you for holding on and for not dying. In the meanwhile, their daughter is living my best life in a safe country. And wait for me, because I'm gonna go back soon. Hopefully to a peaceful Ukraine.
曾经以为新国会会有新气象，但一上任就开始扩权，上街抗议，他们就提高罢免门槛。中央政府的钱几千亿的被挖走，建设台湾的预算被砍了又砍。原来这一切都有迹可循。
大罢免大成功嘛
7月26日回家投票，同意罢免，还给台湾人一个正常的国家。